Hey everybody, welcome to week 6. You guys have made it to the end of this class. Definitely want to just commend you guys on the perseverance that you had and kind of walking through this material. So this week we are going to look at human behavior and how it's impacted kind of at the macro level, macro level. We've touched on this a little bit over the last couple weeks, but wanted to really dive in a little bit deeper in this material. I'm not going to go over chapters 13 and 14 in detail. I instead want to kind of focus on the assignments and really kind of talking a little bit about what those look like, and just really using the assignments as a way to really kind of hone in on what these two things are. So I am going to start at 6.2, discussion 6.2. So really, this week is somewhat of a light week. Wrapping up the week, wrapping up this course, we have 2 discussion posts, and the final exam, and then a journal. And so I'm in this video, I'm going to kind of just cover the 2 discussions and the journal because the exam is pretty self-explanatory. However, I probably will touch on briefly some of the things I look for just within the exam itself if you haven't read my comments thus far. So, getting started, 6.3 talks a lot about community, and this is a very important piece, I think, for the people that we work with. Because I think in today's day and age, community looks different than it ever has before. And I say that because most individuals that I have come in contact with don't know who their neighbors are, don't know that they can trust their neighbors, and really struggle to identify resources in the community that aren't of a social service organization. Now, I don't know if that's just the population I've typically worked with. I work with any inner city individuals who suffer from mental illness. And so unless there's already some sort of support system around that person, most people are not well equipped to go out into the community to identify support systems. So under number one, it says become knowledgeable about how to describe community by reading, understanding, and describing the community. And this comes out of the University of Kansas's Community Toolbox. This thing is chock full of material for community development and understanding community itself. And when I say chock full, I mean you can actually go through it and still not get through it all. By the time you get through it, you need to go back and reread what you read because there's so much material that you have to put it all together. So, anyway, describe in detail. So it says describe in detail a community to which you belong. It can be as broad or specific as you'd like, but make sure you understand what constitutes a community. And I think this is what I'm really going to be looking for. What makes a community community? And I think one of the things that I can really identify with is in my church community, it is a group of people who are committed to doing a particular thing, right? And so that's probably how I would kind of define that community. And so looking at being a part of the church community, looking at being a part of a community of therapists. So I provide therapy on a regular basis, and so being able to identify, and even not even just therapists in general, but looking at, I do a lot of psychodynamic therapy, and so looking at inner child stuff, looking at childhood development and attachment and how that's impacted the person's adult functioning, and so that is a community in and of itself. You can have trauma-focused CBT. You can do DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, community of adult therapists versus child therapists would look completely different. I also would describe myself as someone who identifies with football fans. That's a community. It's game day is an experience. You make it an experience. You spend time with people, things like that. You're able to connect. And so I think a lot of people struggle to identify what community looks like because today's community, most people don't know who their neighbors are. Most people don't know what their supports are in their physical surrounding areas. And so identifying groups of individuals that you have a common theme with, I think is an important piece. So one of the things that most of the people I serve struggle to even identify. What are their hobbies? How can they even tap into any type of resource to be able to create a safe space where they feel loved and accepted, essentially? Which is really sad. It's really sad for me to see those folks really struggling with that type of stuff. Discussion 6.3. This is a good one. The video that Bill Moyers puts on, I think is really impactful because social movements impact who we are as individuals. To the extent that we create justice and self-actualization for individuals that are marginalized. And quite honestly, I feel like this is our role not only as a social worker but as a Christian. I'm going to probably go on a Christian tangent here, if you will, my own spiritual beliefs. And so I think that Jesus didn't come to create a new religion. Jesus came to create heaven on earth, essentially, in the sense that we love individuals and we love the marginalized. We don't glorify power, and we humble ourselves to understand the needs of others around us, whether that's poor, whether that's individuals who morally don't necessarily match up to what we think should happen. And so when we create social movements, I think sometimes we have to take a look at, not only from a social work perspective, but from a Christian perspective, how is this demoralizing the person that God created in this other person, right? So if I as a, and I know IWU stance on homosexuality, and LGBTQ, gender conformity type stuff. But to me personally, my thought as a Christian is how do I wrap around this person in a way that can support them and love them for the person that God created in them? Does that mean that I agree with or walk into that lifestyle? Not at all. But I think it also provides me an opportunity to get to know the person that God actually created. And quite honestly, through trauma, understanding trauma, my understanding of attachments and, just different trauma and neglect, abuse and neglect within adulthood, I think that we could really nail down some things that have gone wrong in a person's life, that they miss the mark, quite honestly, and that's what sin is. And I'm not saying that the homosexuality itself is what the sin is, but I would say that if we could identify traumas and neglect issues, or abuse and neglect within a person's life, because we all have them. Regardless of how good of a family that you have, we all have some form of abuse or neglect that have impacted us. I grew up in a stable household. Mom and dad still married. They're still married 40-some years. But the neglect was prevalent. I only got beat one time by my dad pretty bad. physically, but the neglect itself was what was prevalent, and out of that has caused so many just issues for me as an adult and how I relate to people. And so I think we all miss the mark. Romans says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I don't think that means that we don't, when it says we all fall short of the glory of God, I think it means that we miss the mark and are not living in the way that God has created us to live. That's how I see it. And so when I look at this discussion and I think about social movements and I think about me as a Christian, I think about how I can come alongside people to uplift and support and understand who they are as the people that God created. So that was a long tangent, but it's just part of me, who I am, as far as my beliefs on how to continue to build community and love those around me for who God has created. Because I think, heard a sermon on this one time, not too long ago, a few weeks ago actually, and it said, and so if you think about the Garden of the Garden of Eden, there was two things. There was a tree of life, and then there was a tree of not the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of knowledge is what the devil tempted Eve with, right? Surely God didn't say you would die, right? Where I see that is, the devil even said, if you eat of this, you will be like God. And so I think the one thing that God does not want us to do is be like God, in a sense that the judgment is up to him. And I think after sin entered the world is where judgment came, not only from how God views us, but also how we view other people. And so you see it in Cain and Abel. It's not, you don't have to look very far in the Bible before the first person's judged by another person, right? And so if we enter into a thought that the only thought that I have of this person is that God created them and was worth dying for, Jesus was worth dying for. And so if I enter into that type of thought process about an individual, I can enter into a relationship with that person regardless of what they've done in the past. And I can love them for who they are and the person that God created in them. So sorry about that. So 6.4, we're going to look at the exam. One of the things that I want you guys to take a look at when you answer questions is answer fully. A lot of people, for the points that you guys are missing, you guys are doing a really good job on these exams and being able to identify and put in your own words things that you've learned over the last couple weeks. I don't want you guys losing points over not answering the question completely. And so I just highly encourage you guys to look at your answers when you write it. Two things. One, look for your first off, I would say attack the answer from a very thorough thought process. Am I answering this question fully? And so just get it out there, reread it, and then look through the question. If it asks multiple parts, answer the question that way. Answer it with multiple parts. If it says, how do you think communities can be impacted by social media? And then you answer the question about social media, but then you don't tell me why, or go into depth, then I can't read, I can't read what you're trying to think. And that's a part of being online as well. So if there's a multiple, that was a horrible example about how social media impacts community. I get it. So if a question's asked, I don't think this is a question on there, but how can communities be impacted by social media? In what ways are positive impacts, and in what ways are negative impacts? If you just say that, if you give me a basic answer and don't really go in depth about the positive or negative aspects, and when I say go in depth, at least two sentences. One sentence doesn't tell me a whole lot, quite honestly. And so I want to see some depth of thought when you're answering these questions, because this is the only way that I can really identify that you're really picking up on the things that you've been learning over the course of the last few weeks. So that's all I got to say about the exam. The questions are fairly self-explanatory. However, if you have a question, feel free to reach out to me. The last part here is a journal. And it says, in 2 well-organized paragraphs, write a journal entry addressing the following. What issues regarding environmental, economic, and social justice do you feel passionate about, and why? Is there a social movement connected to your passion? If so, describe it. If not, why do you think that there isn't one? And so for me, how I would answer that, coming out of social work, my BSW, quite honestly, I was a little lost and confused. I didn't really know what I liked. I never really thought of social justice, quite honestly, before I went to school. And so a lot of it was all new to me. There were 2 things coming out of it that I really appreciated and God opened my eyes to. One was homelessness. I had volunteered at a homeless shelter downtown Indianapolis, and really that's what got me into social work. And so the other is, so with homelessness, I think there's a lot there. Mental illness, substance use, a lack of employability, lack of affordable housing, family issues. There's all sorts of things that really impact a person's homelessness, and nobody really knows until you get to know the person. But the other thing I am really passionate about from a social justice standpoint is the equal rights of fathers, especially in non-custodial homes. I think that so essentially I had this discussion with folks at one point. So this is mom's side of the family, this is dad's side of the family. I get that there's separation. I get that that might be the best thing for the relationship, and I get that that might be the best thing for the family in general. However, what I would say, if this is mom's family and this is dad's family, and you just throw this away and you don't even think about anything, two things happen. One, I guess one major thing happens, and everything else is a trickle-down effect from that. I guess 2 things. One, you lose the emotional support of dad. Dads can be emotional. I'm not the most emotional guy, but I provide things for my kids that my wife would never provide. And I say wife because we are together. We've been married for 15 years. But even if I was a non-custodial father, I would be able to bring things to them in the relationship that I had with them in ways that my wife could never, or my ex-wife or girlfriend, whatever would be, could never do, quite honestly. Now, I do want to throw a caveat in that is that if it is an abusive situation, either for the mother or for the child, then I would seek legal help. And if not seeing that father is the most appropriate thing, I would say that. I would also say that if not seeing the mother is the most appropriate thing, then I would protect the child in all circumstances. So I will throw that disclaimer out. However, I would also say that most of the men that I have come in contact with in working with dads over the years want to be able to provide for their kids. They want to see their kids. They want to know how they're doing in school. They want to be able to give back and provide. But the relationship between mom and dad are so toxic that it's not healthy for the child. The other thing is, if you just throw dad's side of the family away, that is a whole support system. And I'm going to say five people. I'm just going to throw 5 people out. That's, instead of 10 people that could support this child, there's now only 5 because you've thrown that family out. So I think the support system that is provided by families, by the father's side, even within a non-custodial family, can be huge. So those are my 2 social justice, environmental or economic passions. Fatherhood and homelessness. So anyway, I have talked for 20 minutes. I pray that you guys will go on to do great things. This is my last video for you guys. So I pray that you guys will go on to impact the world in a way that it's never been impacted before, because as Dr. Seuss says, you are the only you that you can be. I think he says something like that. And so I think the gifts that you have and that you will learn, and the skills that you will learn through these courses, you will be able to take to impact the lives around you. So I pray that you have peace, strength, and continue to grow in your understanding. In Jesus' name, amen. Take care.